All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Transit Talk, our new monthly webinar series with RVA Rapid Transit is putting on. We're very thankful to have you all here with us today. I'm Kendra Norrell. I'm the board president of RVA Rapid Transit. And as many of you know, RVA Rapid Transit is a nonprofit dedicated to educating and advocating for frequent and far-reaching public transportation in the Richmond region. I am also, as my day job, the community engagement coordinator for the City of Richmond's Office of Sustainability. And we are working on RVA Green 2050, the city's equity centered climate action and resilience initiative, which connects directly to public transportation to help to equitably reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and is also a great activity for Earth Day. Happy Earth Day to everyone. One of the things you could do is complete that survey, and that would be great. For our topic today, our transit topic today is regional transit. As we know, there's been a lot happening around public transportation with the creation of the Central Virginia Transportation Authority, the CVTA, which, among other things, is providing a new stream of dedicated funding to GRTC for regional public transit. That funding is, of course, coming from a regional increase in the sales tax and gas tax. Nelson Reveley, RVA Rapid Transit's Director of Operations, will give a brief overview of the CVTA and the Greater RVA Transit Vision Plan to start us off this afternoon. Then we are very excited to have Adrienne Torres, GRTC's new Chief Development Officer, as our guest today. Adrienne is going to be sharing about GRTC's plans around the regional transit and expansion in the near term in light of the new funding from the CVTA. And just a couple of housekeeping notes. We want to note that we are recording this event and we'll have it up shortly on our website, rvarapidtransit.org, and YouTube video or YouTube channel for folks who couldn't be here today. To keep background noises down, please keep yourself on mute during this event, but we definitely want questions or comments in the chat section. We will have time for Q&A based on those questions and comments after Adrienne's presentation. Then after the Q&A, we'll also have a chance to hear from RVA Rapid Transit's Director of Community Engagement, Faith Walker, and the initiative we have recently gotten underway called The Rider's Voice. Faith will be sharing some rider perspectives around possible increases in frequency along the 7A, 7B route or 9 mile out to the airport and White Oak Village. To start though, we're going to have a brief presentation from Nelson on the CVTA as well as the Greater RVA Transit Vision Plan.
Thank you, Kendra, and greetings, everybody. It's really wonderful to have you all here this afternoon with us. And I'm just going to give a brief overview of the CVTA and its connection to the Greater RVA Transit Vision Plan, which is the vision for public transit for our region. So, as you all recall, the CVTA was established just a year ago. It seems like forever ago, but it was just a year ago that the General Assembly established the CVTA for the Greater Richmond area, which is the city of Richmond and Chesterfield, Henrico, Ashland, Hanover, New Kent, Charles City, Goochland, and Powhatan were all the jurisdictions involved. But this all got set up right before the pandemic started. And just a quick bird's eye of what's involved with the CVTA. The funding is again coming from an increase in the sales tax as well as the gas tax and diesel tax. And it's estimated that for FY22, for fiscal year 22, it's going to bring in about $187 million total. And that money is split up in a variety of ways. You can see here under the kind of functions and powers that the CVTA has, that 187 million, about 35% of it goes to regional projects, regional transportation projects through a prioritization process that the CVTA oversees. 15% of it goes directly towards GRTC and regional public transportation, which is what we'll be spending a lot of time on today. And then 50% of it is split back up amongst the localities proportionally based on how much revenue they each raise. And that money is devoted to mobility, local mobility for those jurisdictions, which could be any type of transportation project and could even also include transit. One other piece that I wanted to highlight on the CVTA is it's also charged with a transit governance report, overseeing how public transportation is organized and run. And I just want to give a shout out that our next transit talk in May is going to be focused on transit governance. So we're going to circle back around on that front. On the CVTA as well, it's got, again, it's focused on transportation, but that includes a few key things that they have highlighted. That includes making it as safe and accessible to be able to move about the metro area as possible for folks. That clearly focuses in some respects on maintaining roadways, but also, like we're talking about today, focuses on transit and transit service. And so it's a, needless to say, a really big deal that the CVTA exists now. And I know whether one thinks that 100% of CVTA funds should have been devoted to public transportation, or one thinks that 0% of funds should have been dedicated. Right now, we're again at 15% of those CVTA funds dedicated to transit. It's a big deal that this exists. And on that note, I wanted to give a quick overview as well as how it ties in with the greater RVA Transit Vision Plan. So y'all will recall as well that this plan was conducted largely in 2016, basically like 5 years ago now. It was finished in February 2017, and it was adopted by the Richmond Regional Transportation Planning Organization, which is kind of like a close friendly cousin of the CVTA, finished in April 2017, or adopted by the RRTPO in April 2017. So this is, the vision for what we want to have a robust, effective, comprehensive public transportation system that's been adopted officially by our region's officials. You can see on the left side here, the map that's in the plan itself, which is a great read, always going back to. You can see on the right side what we, RVA Rapid Transit, have done to make it a little more clear and exciting what the major thoroughfares would look like. But at the end of the day, the mission of the Greater RV Transit Vision Plan and what we're trying to get to is a system where folks can easily get about everyday life using public transportation and can reach key destinations readily. And on that note, I will read as well what the vision for 2040 is for the Greater RVA or the Greater RVA Transit Vision Plan. Its visions read, by 2040, transit will connect the Richmond region through an efficient, reliable, seamless, and sustainably funded system that benefits everyone by enabling economic growth, promoting livable and walkable transit-oriented development, expanding access to jobs and services, and strengthening multimodal access within and beyond our region. So that is the goal. And again, it's worth highlighting that the Greater RVA Transit Vision Plan is a goal for 2040, which is still a generation away. And we at RVA Rapid Transit would like to see this vision embodied and brought to reality as soon and quickly as possible. But this is a plan for 2040. On that front, I think it's also helpful to think about the timeline of where we've been in the last 5 to 7 years, because there's been a lot of growth on public transportation in the last 5 to 7 years, so that are kind of pushing forwards on that Greater RVA Transit Vision Plan. It's kind of surprising to remember that the Tiger grant that Henrico and the city won and GRTC won was back in 2014. So it was the fall of 2014 when that grant came through. It's also helpful to remember that BRT planning was going even further back, all the way to around 2008. So that was a long running project. But it was 7 years ago, almost, that the Tiger grant was won. The BRT project was finally approved by the city council and Henrico's Board of Supervisors in February 2016. So about a year and a half later. The Greater RVA Transit Vision Plan that we've been discussing, it was kind of undertaken during that year of 2016 and then again approved in 2017. The Pulse was, of course, built over the course of kind of the end of 2016 and then into the beginning of 2018. And the Pulse opened June 2018, as well as with the redesign of the city's networks. And then Henrico made its extensions, for instance, out to Short Pump September of 2018. So 2018 was when a lot of that planning and a lot of that those projects came online. And then in 2019 and in 2020, the big things happening were in part an expansion and on a focus on the more near term for the greater RVA Transit Vision Plan, with a near-term strategic analysis that was kind of completed in the fall of 2020. And then, of course, the CVTA was established in 2020, and Chesterfield began its line down now Richmond Highway on Route 1 down to John Tyler in March of 2020. Kind of unfortunate timing right when the pandemic hit, but that line has done really, really well, even in the midst of the pandemic. And there's even talk right now they're working on, I mean, I'm sure Adrienne will touch on this some, they're working on even extending that down further another mile. And that all kind of leads us up to the present moment, 2021, when Adrienne and GRTC are working on the regional public transportation plan that's tied in with how the CVTA dollars are spent. And so, you know, part of that 15% that goes to public transportation is something that's annually updated and approved by the CVTA itself. But that's a plan that GRTC has been working on in collaboration with RRTPO. So one final thing before I hand things over to you, Adrienne. When we think about the connections between the CVTA and the greater RVA Transit Vision Plan, we think about all the benefits the folks that a robust regional public transportation system would bring. The operating cost that was estimated for the full vision of public transit in the greater RVA Transit Vision Plan in 2016 dollars was about 123 million, or ranged from about 123 million to 147 million. That updated into 2021 dollars is roughly about 135 to 160 million for full operating costs. You know, if we had the system in place right this red hot second, that's how much it would cost to operate it. When we think about that in connection with the estimated revenue from the CVTA, there's about 28 million that goes towards GRTC from CVTA funds. So we could think of the CVTA funds really as providing, honestly, an unprecedented and powerful base of funding for regional public transportation, but also a base from which we've got to continue to grow if we're going to reach the full system. So that you know, that $28 million that's estimated to come in towards GRTC is that powerful base of roughly kind of a fifth of what the full system, the full greater RVA Transit Vision Plan would cost to run. Again, at the end of the day, the purpose of all this regional public transportation is to make it easier for folks to get around everyday life by bus, so that they can get to jobs, they can get to education, get to the doctor, get to the grocery store. And that's especially for those folks who need public transportation, whether they're seniors or youth, or folks who can't afford the heavy cost of owning and operating a vehicle. But it's also for our full community as a greater Richmond area to have this robust plan or this robust transit system that knits us together and allows us to be one community where folks can, again, get around in the environmentally friendly and cost-effective ways of public transit. So I will hop off my soapbox and hand things over to Adrienne. And we're so grateful and thrilled to have you with us today, Adrienne. And I'm going to unshare so that you can share your screen.
Thank you, Nelson. I will. All right, can you guys see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Nice, okay. Well, thank you for a background in what seemed like a blur in the last 7 years or so of my life. All of that happened so fast, but that was a nice lead up to where we are right now. As you mentioned, I'm the Chief Development Officer at GRTC, and I've had the great opportunity to work on the Regional Public Transportation Plan, which is something new and required under the CVTA authority. So you already covered quite a bit of the background, but just going to reiterate the creation of the CVTA by the General Assembly in 2020 established new funds for the priority of transportation investments in the Richmond region, which you already kind of went down the breakdown of that. The two main funding sources of it are the regional sales tax, as well as use tax and gas and diesel. The CVTA funds will be allocated three ways. So the benefit there for GRTC is that we'll receive 15% of the total dollars that are brought in. So GRTC is projected to receive $20 million in this current fiscal year. It's being accrued as we go. So by the end of the fiscal year, $28 million is projected for next fiscal year. And by 2026, the annual amount is estimated to be about $30 million. So Regional Public Transportation Plan, as required by the legislation, GRTC is currently in the process of developing it. And this is done in coordination with our RTPO. The plan identifies how GRTC will spend the 15% CVTA dollars in FY 2022. The final plan, once complete, will be presented to the CVTA full authority in June 2021. So what we've done so far, Nelson covered this, we have been looking at expansion priorities, and a lot of this has been built on plans that have already been in existence. So Greater Richmond Transit Plan Phase 1, Phase 2, our current transit development plan, as well as the Richmond Transit Network Plan, and then the second phase of that, which was the Henrico expansion. So there was quite a bit of base for us to build kind of the expansion priorities. We met together with a lot of transit agencies as well as the jurisdictional agencies within the region and had a core design. This was a 2.5-day retreat where we got together all day. So you can see the full list of participants. And we developed two concepts. One was the ridership and the other one was the coverage. And I'll get into that a little bit later. But with that, we came up with, if we identified up to, we called it 17 buses, or if we were going to use $10 million worth of the CVTA dollars towards expansion, what would these two different concepts look like? So we came up with those. Neither of them were necessarily a recommendation, but just an alternative of the way to spend the dollars. We did outreach, which was a survey, and did a website that went live. We had 3 weeks of survey, 420 respondents. We did a stakeholder meeting, public meeting, and then we had a second tier of expansion priorities core design meeting. And that was to look at what the stakeholders said, what the public said, and go through and decide, okay, of the coverage and ridership concepts, what would be the best list to prioritize as we continue to move forward. We've been doing additional outreach. Oops, sorry about that. We've been doing additional outreach, trying to minimize the, now we're meeting with the jurisdictions to continue to prioritize this list, as well as kind of go over the prioritization of just the funds in the next year, and are currently developing that draft plan. So kind of a highlight of what we hope to prioritize within the draft. First thing, of course, is just to maintain our existing service. So I mentioned in 21, we're expecting 20 million, and in 22, projected to be 28 million. Well, our system itself is already pretty regional. We just plan for growth in the future. And we really saw for that, especially during COVID, how essential our service was and is. We did not see the same kind of ridership decreases as a lot of other transit agencies across the nation saw. I don't think in terms of local routes, we dropped less than more than 25%, and we've actually increased back since that point in time with our local routes. So the amount that we would need just to keep the current service at the levels it is today is about $20 to $21 million. And the need for this is that the legislation required or gave the jurisdictions the ability to cut their funds to GRTC by 50%. So they could use them for other general funds now that we have this dedicated source. So they did take the opportunity to do that. So with that, we need to use the dollars from CVTA to make sure that the current service still is in existence as it is today, and then build off of that in the future. Second kind of priority within that is, as we met with the core design group, as well as meetings we've had with the jurisdictions, we really saw the importance of what there is transit need in the region where a fixed route system may just not cut it, where the density may not support it, especially more in the rural areas. So we would like to prioritize spending about $200,000 towards a micro mobility study. Exactly what that service would be, where it would be, is something that would be identified through this effort, and hopefully we could do pilots in the subsequent years. Another identified need is our capital projects. One piece is just putting aside about the local jurisdictions with a lot of our larger capital projects give about 4% local match, while using 2% of the CVTA to go towards to help alleviate that, as well as identifying a source in case we don't get grant funds from other sources to really prioritize these large capital projects that really would help the regional growth of our system. For example, we need more buses to actually do the expansion, so fleet replacement and expansion, and then several transfer centers that we've identified throughout the system today. We have a north, west, east, and south kind of major transfer hubs where 5 or more routes come together. We would like to do some infrastructure improvements over there, shelters, accessibility, and then downtown transit center at some point in time in the near future. And then priority 4, which I'll get into kind of how this was developed, but the prioritized expansion list. We have a full list, which I'm going to go through, but throughout the next fiscal year, we plan to work to kind of refine this. We have a lot of limitations. One of them is available operators. With COVID, sick, and just kind of the trend across the nation, we've had a shortage of operators. We're currently running a reduced COVID schedule right now, and actually a big reason for that is a constraint of the amount of operators that we have. So we have lots of campaigns out. Our communications director, as well as HR, is putting a lot of effort into recruitment. So we're hoping to be able to increase these numbers so we could do some level of expansion, as well as put our system back to the levels they were before COVID. Vehicles, I mentioned we have to increase that for expansion. COVID, we're still living in a COVID pandemic world. Hope that this would be different and as FY22 started, but that is not the case, as well as CVTA funds. There's so many priorities out there. So we're really expecting minimal expansion in FY22, but hoping to work to identify what that implementation schedule and priority will be for the future years. So looking at with the surplus, and then also mentioned the 28 million as well as myself for FY22. So if you take 20 and 21 of those dollars and kind of cover the base system to make sure that stays in existence as it is today, then the net is about $6 to $7 million. So looking at the expansion as well as the micromobility results from the study, identifying what kind of expansion needs we could use with that surplus dollars. So going back to the core design, I'm going to go through that in a little bit more detail. This is the ridership concept that was developed. And I hope you guys can see, because I know it's kind of small, but I'll highlight the different enhancements that were listed throughout this. So the first one is a Route 1B extension to Brook and Parham. This runs every 30 minutes. So this is a further extension from Chamberlain and Wilmer that goes up to Brook today. A Route 3A, and it's extending up, so it ends here right now, but extending it further, so it goes all the way to Azalea, providing 30-minute service of here. A Route 7C, increasing that to actually a 15 minutes, so that would go up to Laburnum on 9 Mile. Route 1 from Chamberlain and Wilmer, Hull and Broad Rocks every 10 minutes. So you'll see this is a darker red. Route 3B, right now the 3B and the 111, they operate as 2 separate routes, and you transfer at the Food Lion on Route 1. Well, combining these as one route, 3B, would give the ability of a 1-seat ride for someone who needed job access in downtown or traveling even further north past downtown. Route 2B, this would serve Warwick to Southside Plaza and Route 1C on Whole Street every 30 minutes. Route 1A, this is extended to Chesterfield Town Center. Route 5, this is more frequent every 10 minutes. Today it's every 15 minutes. Another piece of that is actually adding the 77, which currently runs from U of R down to around BCU area, but combining that with the 5 and every other Route 5 would go all the way to U of R to actually enhance that service, and it no longer would travel in the Fan and Museum District. Route 19, increasing the frequency to every 20 minutes. Routes 18 and 79 out here, actually combining those together, and they would then have 30-minute service. And a big benefit of that is it now actually increases access to several of the hospitals in Western Henrico, as well as increased frequency at Amtrak stations. So that's kind of a review of the ridership concept. And I'm going to go ahead and highlight how this is connected with some of the transit vision plan near-term ones. They called for an increase in frequency on the Route 7, the Midlothian Turnpike, the extension down to Chesterfield Town Center was also in that plan. The extension up to Brook and Ferrum and actually even further north was also in that plan, as well as the Route 19 extension or enhancement as far as increasing frequency. So a lot of similarities to the near-term plan. The coverage concept, less dark red and less red also. So I'll go over some of those differences, but you'll have a 1C, and this is extended all the way up to Hanover, the Memorial Regional Hospital, the Bon Secours Hospital out there. Same thing as the ridership, extending the Azalea 3A. A difference here is not an increase in frequency on the 7, but a Route 14 extended to White Oak and the airport, which would replace our Route 4B today. So it gives you increased service on Williamsburg Road and further out. Route 86 extended to Meadowdale Boulevard and Food Lion on Route 1. This is the service here, making the connection to Route 1. Route 3B extended to John Tyler, so this is consistent with the ridership concept. And then you have a couple new routes in Chesterfield in addition to the 86. An 84 that goes to Wilkinson Terrace with 60-minute service. And then an 85 that goes down to Chesterfield Government Center. Route 1C is extended further out to Commonwealth Center with 60-minute service. And then the Route 2B serves Warwick to Southside Plaza, and routes 1B and 1C on whole every 30 minutes. Instead of the 19 being increased in frequency, it's extended out to Goochland to serve the Sheltering Arms VCU facility out there. And the 18 and 79 are still the same as today as the ridership concept. But one thing I think I forgot to mention that is true in the ridership and the coverage concept is the service to Innsbruck. Route 29X today is more of it's a commuter route. So you go pretty much one direction in the morning and the other direction in the evening. The recommendation is kind of to use the non-ridership trips to serve Innsbruck. So if you're going to pick people out at the Park and Ride, you stop at Innsbruck on the way, and then same thing on the way back in the evening. The Route 1B is extended further up to serve Virginia Center Commons, so it goes further than the Brook and Perham. We looked at several demographics as we compared the two scenarios, the ridership and the coverage. And one that I just put in here just for comparison is 45-minute job access. So this is comparing from the current system to either concepts, what the difference in 45-minute job access to the net increase. And the darker the blue, the more jobs it's serving. So they both have increases. They both are an enhancement in terms of job access from our current system, but you do see a lot more in general jobs as well as a lot more darker blue in the ridership concept than the coverage concept. And that's that 1879 as well as that 19 out here in the west end of Henrico, the Midlothian Turnpike route. The Route 7 really makes a big difference with the frequency. And then a combination of the 3 and the 1 up here in Azalea and Brook and Perham have increases to jobs on the north side. So after we had gone through those concepts, they went out for public input as well as we reviewed them with our board. We had the working group meet again. And in that, they listed out the priorities from both the concepts. So this is the full list. I'm not going to read through them. I'm actually going to just kind of show you the images and highlight it again. So they picked the Brook and Perham was seen as a kind of short-term priority, not going all the way up to Virginia Center Commons this time. Both scenarios had the Innsbruck piece I just mentioned, so that stayed as a priority. The 5 increased to 10 minutes, as well as the 5A, which is a 77, making that change. That stayed on the list. And then the 7 was seen as a priority, going up 9 miles. The 1A, which was in both the ridership and coverage to Midlothian Turnpike, Chesterfield Town Center, was also a priority. The connections of the 111 and Route 3B to be one route. And then in Chesterfield, in the southern portion of Chesterfield, the 84, 85, and 86 were also seen as priorities. In the Western Henrico area, 18 and 79, the enhancement to be able to increase access to the hospitals, as well as the Amtrak station, was also listed as a priority. So kind of next steps, we are continuing outreach, continuing to work with the jurisdictions, currently working to identify what we would put forward for kind of a phase 2 public outreach effort. We are going to present on the draft plan to several committees to get feedback in May. We'll be developing the final plan in May as well, and then present the final plan in June to our board, committees, as well as the full CBTA authority. With that, do you guys have any questions?
Thank you so much for your presentation, Adrienne. Really helpful insights and explanation of all of the possibilities. Yeah, we are ready for, we have some time for Q&A. As a reminder, you can put your questions and comments in the chat section, and I'll read them out loud. We can move through them that way. But while we wait for that to populate, we have a couple questions on my end, I guess. Is there, oh wait, someone. This is far more interesting than anything I would come up with. As volume comes back, when will we see accordion buses on the long pulse platforms?
We did apply for grant funds for the articulated vehicles, and we did receive approval for the funds. However, we are actually about to kick off a feasibility study for what it would take to adjust the stations to be able to accommodate those vehicles. So they were built in terms of width to be able to accommodate a 60-foot articulated vehicle, but each of the stations kind of have their idiosyncrasies that we have to look at to make sure they could fit the concrete pad at them, as well as where the doors open have to be looked at. So I hope to kick that off actually next week to do a study, and then after that point in time, we'll determine what's needed to adjust them so that we could fit those accordion style articulated vehicles at them. So definitely a priority for GRTC, especially as we get out of these COVID times and the ridership and capacity increases on them. They would definitely help alleviate that.
Great. Another comment from the chat. When should we expect information regarding the phase 2 public comment period? Will there be an increased effort to conduct the survey in person or existing buses, or will it be conducted solely online like the first survey in February, March?
We are working through that timeline now. I do not have set exactly when it would be. I think we hope to do it, I think, closer to the summer, especially as we work through kind of those expansion priorities. We did put an effort into going to some of the more frequent bus stops with the first survey. We did do some in person. However, we tried to restrict that because of COVID. But I do see we'll do a lot more of those, especially as people get the vaccine in person, maybe on the bus, but at least at some of those more frequent bus stops. So yeah, we'll put a lot of effort into that.
Throw back to the articulated buses. Isn't it better for riders to just run more buses at lower frequencies before spending money on the redo of the stations?
So the capital dollars are more of a one-time cost versus increasing the frequency of a bus is a annual operating cost that would just have to be sustained in perpetuity. So that is the idea. Because I think I did the quick calculations, even to increase the frequency from, let's say, 10 minutes, which is a lot of time more VCUs using the buses or a lot of people out and about, where we are seeing some of that capacity at midday and peak. That's when articulate-based buses would be very useful. It was somewhere upwards of $700,000 annually to actually operate that service. Another thing to keep in mind is also the more service we put out there on the pulse, the limitation operators we also have. So the capital dollars being a one-time thing, and hopefully it's not too substantial, when we identify that would make a big difference.
How will the localities' plans for their share of the CVTA funds be coordinated with GRTC's expansion plans?
You mean their 50% funds? Sorry, if you could clarify. If it's just for the GRTC 15%, we are working with the jurisdictions, having conversations with them, as well as working closely with the TPO, where the jurisdictions are also part of that. So they will continue to have dialogue with us, as well as work in the prioritization of the funds for the 15%. As far as 50% and the 35%, it's a whole different effort than the GRTC plan.
Yeah, okay, so the 2040 vision is great, but how do we get there? Who should we as riders talk to, and when to get GRTC the money they need to increase the quality and frequency of our transit? And what should we be asking for?
So the intent of the near-term transit vision plan was to kind of come up with a more 3 to 5 year implementation version of the 2040. So we've definitely used that as a base to build this next, more hopefully implementable plan that has a little bit more service dollars attached to it than even the near-term one, because the near-term still had kind of a range. You could do 30-minute service, you could do hourly service, or you could do full 15-minute service. But I mean, just through this process, I would say when we do the phase 2 outreach, giving input on the priorities, reaching out to your jurisdictions, wherever you can give input, I think would make a difference.
Definitely. Do you have a sense of when the pandemic policy of essential rights only and route limitations due to COVID might be lifted? Or if not a rough timeline, what factors you think contribute to that decision?
I'm sorry, can you repeat it again?
Do you have a sense of when the GRTC's pandemic policy of essential rights only and route limitations due to COVID might be lifted?
I do not.
Yeah.
I think all of this, taking it one day at a time to address all of the COVID impacts. We are, like I said, we're continuing our COVID schedule and our next schedule change, which is in June. So we will be continuing that schedule at least until September, and then we'll revisit it. We changed again.
Okay, cool. Let's see. Thinking long-term, a percentage of CVTA funding comes from fuel taxes. As more personal vehicles and potential state and industry vehicles transition to electric, any indications on what other funding sources will help supplement CVTA to keep plans like this supported?
Ooh. We are always researching new funding sources, but I do not have any right now as far as when we switch over to electric and what sources will help subsidize with that.
How does free fare affect the budget for expansion?
We're currently running free fare, if you're talking about just related to COVID. We are using the COVID relief funds to actually subsidize the fares at this point in time, and we plan on continuing that over the next year as well. But we do not plan, and even if we were to do a zero fare pilot in the future after COVID, the CVTA dollars will not be used for that. We'll identify other funding sources.
Let's see. Is 100% of transit planning based on the buses? Is there any planning being given to light rail on the main corridors or regional commuter rail within the regional planning, like to Ashland, Petersburg, Midlothian, Mechanicsville, et cetera?
Yeah, we're just looking at buses, or in the study I mentioned about micromobility, whatever that mode may end up being. But no, we're not looking at rail.
Yeah, we got time for about one more question. If there's one more that someone has a burning question in the chat. These have been great questions. I guess I'll go through with this one. To whatever extent you can share, how have conversations about regional transit been going in the region so far? Do you think people have been receptive and interested, or more concerned?
When we first kicked it off, I would say we focused on expansion. So that is always very, very exciting. And I would say transit in general, it's not all very exciting, I would say. It's new to the region as a whole as far as GRTC and the idea of having a dedicated funding source. So I think, and all of this is just such a constrained timeline as well. So getting it right, getting it organized, and getting it complete in a certain time, I think it's been nice working with the region to do that.
That's awesome. Great. Well, thank you so much, Adrienne. And thank you, everyone, for good questions and discussion. Any last words from you before we switch over?
For me?
You don't have to.
Yeah. No, just thank you for having me. It's exciting to continue to talk about this very new transit dedicated funding and what we can do with it. I think it is definitely an exciting time for the region.
Yeah, thank you. So just as a reminder, we'll also be emailing folks Friday or early next week with a link to the recording so you can share with others you think might be interested in learning more about this topic. And we're going to transition now to hear from RVA Rapid Transit's new Director of Community Engagement, Faith Walker, about an initiative we have recently gotten underway called The Rider's Voice.
Thank you, Kendra. And thank you again, Adrienne, for the great presentation, as well as Nelson. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. My name is Faith Walker. I am RVA Rapid Transit Director of Community Engagement. My goal this year is to root RVA Transit's policy and advocacy work deeply in the community and perspectives of everyday riders. At its core, my work focuses on amplifying and supporting stories, concerns, and interests of everyday bus riders in decision-making about public transportation throughout the region. I am also engaging potential bus riders where lines currently do not exist. Now, we've recently launched an initiative called The Rider's Voice, which is aimed at collecting and amplifying those stories for better transit throughout the Richmond region. Now, as always, the ultimate mission is to make it easier to get around everyday life using public transit. And the idea of the Rider's Voice is for folks to be able to share their rider story, overall specific thoughts on key topics. So for instance, last month, we asked folks about zero fare and how it has affected them. And this month, we've been asking about the possibility of growth of the system in reach and in frequency. So it has been challenging to do community engagement during the pandemic. So to start, we created a hotline where folks can just call in, as well as an online survey where folks can fill out. But thankfully and excitedly, I've been able to start reaching out and talking to folks face to face, which has been really helpful. I wanted to play 2 audio clips for you of recent responses. These were from folks on the 7A and 7B right there in front of White Oak Village on Laburnum Avenue. And they are actually sharing about the differences that increased frequency would make for their everyday life. And we'll play those now.
Well, my name is Classy, and I work here at the Sheraton 4 Points. The bus that I catch is the 7A to go home, which is confusing for me because I'm from Georgia and our buses are a lot different. But it's one way or another bus. So I got to catch one bus to come and one bus to go. And they come every hour. So if I missed, like I just missed the 6 o'clock bus, my next bus don't come to 7:05. So I found me something to do because I knew it wasn't gonna come to 7:05, but still I should be at the house with my kids.
All right, we'll play the next.
Hello, my name is Angie, and I take the 7A and the 7B most of the time to get to doctor's appointments for my kids, to do grocery shopping, and to get back and forth to work. For the bus to be able to come every 30 minutes would be beneficial for myself, and just because I'm trying to start a new job with Amazon, and right now I can't get the shift that I need with my kids because the bus comes every hour. So that prevents me from being able to get a better job to support my family. If the bus came every 30 minutes, it would change everything for me.
Wow. Thank you, Class C and Angie, for sharing your voice and your story with us and stressing how it's important that the bus and its frequency can be on folks' everyday life. We'll be gathering more bus rider perspectives and stories like this on a regular basis. So I want to strongly encourage you, if you are a regular bus driver, or rider, to give the hotline a call or fill out our online survey, or simply just reach out to me directly to share your views. If you know of any rider you think may be game to share their views, please help me by spreading the word. Folks can, if they feel more comfortable reaching out to me directly, you can do that. I'll attach my email on this the chat. It's faith@rvarapidtransit.org. You can also find more info about the Writer's Voice at rvarapidtransit.org/Writer's Voice. And Nelson to put that in our chat. So on behalf of RVA Rapid Transit, I just want to thank everyone for being here today. Please note the next 2 transit talks are coming up. We'll send out more information about these as we get closer to it. But on noon, at noon, Thursday, May 20th, we'll be talking about transit governance. That topic is heating up right now. And then on Thursday, June 17th, we'll talk about better bus stops and steps to improve amenities and even litter at bus stops in our region. We'll send more information with the follow-up. And if you're not already on our email list, you can keep in touch with us and whatever we're up to by signing up at rvarapidtransit.org. We don't flood your inbox, but we'll send you all the essentials. Thank you again, everyone, for being here today. And a big thanks to Adrienne Torres for a great presentation and discussion of possible near-term expansions for our transit network. We will email you all when we have the recording of today's event up on our YouTube channel so folks can carry on the discussion about key issues for our region. Thank you all so much and happy Earth Day. Enjoy the rest of your day.